Hey, welcome. Hi guys, how are you? Welcome back to Dinosaur Omelet Land. I'm Christopher and
I'm Angela.
That's Angela, my delightful wife. Welcome back guys. If you're first time people here, hit the old likey button and the subscribe button. We do put a lot of effort into these educational videos, and this one's going to be a good one. Fermenting grain, how to ferment it, why you should ferment it, and what happens during the fermenting process, what all that is. So we're going to discuss all that shortly, show you how to do it. This time of year, a lot of people are looking to do chickens and chicken feed and how to ferment. So people start asking, what's this I hear about fermenting chicken feed? Was that something beneficial? Should I do that? Yeah, so real quick with the fermenting feed, I'm going to give a little... introduce us a little further in just a sec about what we do here, but about the fermenting feed. So in our experience, the people who are wanting to ferment, they are very involved with their critters. They want healthy birds, healthy chickens, and this is really absolutely a good way to provide quality food. Hey, it's Flyer Dad from the Netherlands. Hello, cousin. How are you? Thanks for stopping in. Yeah, so fermenting absolutely food for your chickens or for yourself can be exquisitely beneficial, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I really love the science behind this, and I won't get too deep into it. Hi, Susan. Hope you're feeling better, or at least on the mend. All right, so before we begin all the blabbering about fermenting, and we're going to show you guys, we got, what do you call it? Props, show and tell. We're going to actually show you how to ferment. We'll do the water and straining and all that, and show you how that works. It's real simple. You do it all the time.
Yeah.
I've watched.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so a little bit about us. If you guys are surfing the internet, what do you still call it, the web? Do they even say surfing anymore? I'm like 106. I don't know. Back when the internet got invented, we said surfing it. So if you found this and you're wondering who we are, we're a hatchery. We hatch critters, and we're located in southern Lancaster County in Pennsylvania. What's our main critter? Or two main critters, I guess.
Main would be the jumbo wild Coturnix quail for meat and eggs. And then we also do silkies for pets.
Which are chickens.
Yes.
Which eat fermented feed.
Yes.
Which is healthy for them, because we want them healthy. We also have black Australorps for our food, for their dual purpose meat and egg birds. So we want them healthy. So we feed them healthy food, as well as they're, free ranging around and finding what they can. Right? Okay. So we're a small hatchery, Southern Lancaster County. Yeah, we focus on the jumbo quail because they're really exquisite food production animals. And we have a ton of info if you're interested in that. Stalk us on the Facebook or check out previous videos here on the YouTube. We have a ton of videos about quail. If you have any questions, just drop them in. And if you guys have any questions about fermentation, drop them in here too as well during this video while it's live or afterwards, because we always get back to them. Yeah?
Yeah.
Would you like to say anything? Because I'm going to be teacher today, because I'm Professor Science. Do you want to be Professor Science?
Yeah, I do.
She's going to do the demonstration.
I do the fermenting for the birds, the whole process, and so he's going to get into the nitty gritty details as to like
only the nitty, not the gritty.
Yeah.
Okay, so fermentation. Fermentation, you guys are familiar with it. Maybe you think of fermentation like you're fermenting beer. And you know what? I was talking to her before this started. When you ferment chicken feed, are you producing alcohol? No. Essentially, no. You're creating parts per billion, very, very trace amounts, because of the type of bacteria that's doing the fermentation process in the grain. And the way you ferment, we're going to show you, but the way you ferment is you cover your substrate, whatever your food is, with Heineken. Oh yeah, Heineken beer. That's Netherlands Dutch beer. We're not making Heineken. We're making chicken feed. So you're covering your substrate in water, and substrate feed. You're covering your feed in water. You're going to fill it up with water. Now, what is this doing? One, it's saturating the grain. It's providing a medium for the bacteria to start coming to life and producing their chemical processes. And it's also creating an anaerobic environment. Air is not getting down to the grain. So we have this really awesome opportunity now for the bacteria to do their job. Hey, Kelly. Hi. People are dropping in here. What's up? So the lactobacillus, and that's the variety of bacteria that's going to be doing a lactic acid fermentation. This might be a little bit of information, but you'll understand. It's pretty simple. Think of lactobacillus there's about 200 species of lactobacillus, and they're used in the fermentation process to produce they do a lot of things, but they're producing an acidic environment. So once you're covering up your grain and the little bacteria start eating the grain, they start fermenting it, or whatever they're fermenting, and as a byproduct, they produce this acid. They produce a lot of byproducts, but one of the byproducts is lactic acid, and that acid in the water creates what's called an acid bath. And what's cool about that is they're the only ones who like it living down there in the acid swamp. Bad bacteria are not going to get in there and rot the grain. The grain stays clean and fresh and edible for your birds. It's not going to spoil because it's sitting in a vat of water. It smells like it's spoiling, so it gets a sour smell to it, right? Mm-hmm. Now that's a byproduct from the fermentation process, and that's actually good because of the compounds it's producing. But in the water, you've got it nice and safe and clean to where the lactobacillus are munching away and producing their byproducts, creating an acidic environment and keeping it safe for them. So that's why also you're not going to have a lot of alcohol produced, because alcohol is produced by yeast, and yeast, they don't like it too much down there. So they're not going to thrive like the lactobacillus. Is this making sense? Mm-hmm. I don't know if I talked too much. If I'm not making sense, tell me to shut up and we'll just start pouring stuff. But it becomes a safe environment for that fermentation process. Now, what happens when you are fermenting? This is the cool part. I'm going to try to keep it simple. I've been studying this stuff a long time. I hope I can recall everything. And it's really, something flew down. It's really, fermented foods are really beneficial, not just for your animals, but for you. Something you may have heard about recently is the gut microbiome. You know, there's a lot of talk about that recently. FYI, little information. I do not prescribe to any magic bullets, like one thing is good for you and then you're good. Do you need a specific temperature to ferment it? Yes, you should have a specific, not an exact temperature, but a range of temperatures. What's a little above room temperature?
Yeah.
Like 65,
yeah,
70
so
degrees.
pretty much if it's cold temperatures, like some people like to do it outside, have their buckets and stuff outside. If it's cold temperatures, it's still going to ferment, it's just going to take a little longer. So the warmer it is, the faster the process. So,
we'll get into it.
Comfortable temperature.
We'll get into it, because we're going to do that. We're going to talk about the temperature process again, temperature range. But what's happening when you ferment the grain? Is that what I was talking about? Because I might lose my brain real quick. Mm-hmm. So the fermentation process, you've heard about gut microbiome. Well, that's part of what they're talking about are these microbes that live in your gut. Most of the cells made of you are not you. They're little microorganisms living in your intestinal digestive tract, your gut microbiome. So these are little organisms in your gut that help break down, metabolize, and transport and utilize the food you're ingesting. The microbes in your gut that are doing this, you've heard them, probiotics. They call them probiotics. Biotic, living thing. So you have prebiotics, probiotics, which are the organisms in your gut, and postbiotics. A prebiotic, losing my tongue. So the prebiotics are the things that the probiotics eat. Okay, plant compounds like complex fibers and things like that. They go down the gut. You can't eat them. Your body can't digest these hard things, but Mr. Bacteria in the gut can. So a bacteria, probiotic, eats them up and they produce their byproducts, which are probiotics, which are the health-conveying beneficial compounds that the probiotics are making in your gut. A little bit of a sidetrack, but you hear about that. Mm-hmm. In fermentation, there are probiotics. So you're using the lactobacillus. There are other organisms that are facilitating the fermentation, but I'm going to focus on the lactobacillus. But there are others, and conversely, when you feed the food to the chicken, or if you're eating fermented food, you're eating those probiotics, and hopefully they get down to your gut and they become part of you. All right? Is this making sense? Mm-hmm. All right.
And overall, the gut biome is so beneficial for the whole body as a whole, right?
Chicken body too.
Function.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's good.
You had mentioned But before we got a comment, you were saying that it's not, you don't believe in the whole magic bullet thing.
Yeah, I'm not into the magic bullet, like don't do one thing, like, oh, I'm eating goji berries, now I'm super healthy, or oh, I'm doing this thing. No, 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 no. It's overall
It's a
health, and your optimal
combination.
health, or your chicken's optimal health, is a combination of multiple inputs. Your chicken eating fermented food, yeah, that's great for them, but they're living in a little confined box with 50,000 other chickens. It's probably not going to make a big difference because of their environmental condition. You know, chicken's like, oh, I'm going to be healthier, I'm eating fermented food. No, you're not, dude. You're living squished up with a million other chickens. But yeah, so I'm not into the magic bullet, like fad diet kind of stuff.
Yeah, you want to be balanced and
Lifestyle
look at
change.
the needs of the whole body, like we just mentioned. But like he mentioned, chicken being cooped up in a tiny house. You're thinking of the whole balance of what the organism, what the creature needs to be happy and healthy.
Right, now moving along. Down in the fermentation process, which we're going to show you, well, it's not going to ferment, we're just going to wet it, give you a fake example. But the fermentation process, what the little bacteria are doing, which is really cool, is they're acting kind of like an external fake stomach. They're pre-digesting a lot of these grains. They're breaking down the compounds that are a little difficult for the animal or the human to digest and break down themselves. So the bacteria, okay, let's, like I said, lactobacillus, we'll talk about them. They're producing maybe particular enzymes. They're going to start breaking down compounds in the feed. So like the complex starches, there's these, I talked about these enzymes, protease, amylase, and lipase. Protease, you don't have to remember this. It's just interesting stuff. It's an enzyme that breaks down protein. So it takes the complex protein chains and it starts breaking the peptide bonds, and I know, Mr. Science. And it makes it a little more bioavailable for the chicken when they're eating it. Do you ferment food for your quail? We don't, but you can, and we'll talk about that in a second, Susan. Amylase, which is really important because that's a lot of what the grain is starches, is that the amylase enzyme will start to break down those complex starches into simpler sugars, making it more bioavailable for the chicken. And when we say sugar, here's a cool and important thing to remember too. When you're eating, so scientifically, when we're talking about sugar versus I'm going to the kitchen and I want to lose weight, and we're talking about sugar, it's kind of like two different things, all right? So in this context, the sugar, you know, it's a carbohydrate, whatever. When you're eating it, or when these animals are ingesting it, or you're eating something, you're usually eating it with other compounds. It's not just strictly glucose. You know, you're eating other compounds and fibers with it, so it's going to behave differently metabolically as it's passing through your digestive system. Ooh, Kelly has a question. Finally, we can see here. Oh, I didn't pop them
Oh,
up.
it's disappearing.
I understand what you're saying, but I bet most don't. I have a science background. I love all the fancy lessons from you guys. Well, I'm trying to make this simple. I won't get into too complex stuff. I'm probably losing people. Like, what are you talking about? Where was it talking about? Talking about, okay.
The sugars.
Yeah, so I'll finish with this. Kelly's probably right. I'm boring you guys. It's really fascinating science, though, and I strongly suggest you look into it. Look on YouTube. There's plenty of videos about it. But during the fermentation process, the huge benefits are the pre-digestion or the pre-breakdown of complex compounds, proteins, lipids, and the starches that the bacteria are breaking down. It makes them more bioavailable when they're digested. You're adding to the food, you're adding bulk to it. It's voluming up. It's gathering water, so now you have more hydration for your animal. Hi guys, love you both on your channel.
Oh, hey.
Hi, hon. That's your beautiful cousin. Yeah, so your food's going to volumize. It's going to have water in it. They're going to get more hydrated, and they're going to have more nutrition, which is important because what happens with an animal is biologically, they begin to understand they're satiated nutritionally. So now they have a higher availability of nutrients that they're eating from the fermented food. So their body's telling them, hey, you have your nutrients. You're satisfied with nutrients. Whereas before, they're going to have to eat maybe a little more to get the nutrients that they need for whatever their body needs that day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So during fermentation, all these things become a little more available. They're partially broken down. You're introducing probiotic bacteria into the animal's intestinal tract, which is good for them too. And it's tasty. And you potentially, if you play your cards right, you're going to save on feed again because it's going to be volumized. Yes?
Yeah. Here, let me
And hydrated.
summarize in kind of a simple way. So you're starting with your dry feeds, whatever type of feed you're using. It's not really important the type, but we're usually working with whole grains. So you're starting with your dry feed. Do you want to hold up a prop so you can see that?
Oh, yes.
Before we actually do the process, I just wanted to like explain. So whatever your feed is going to be dry.
We feed grains. So this is
Then you're
grain.
going to be adding water to it, and you're going to be wanting the water to be way above the grain, and then you're going to mix it, and this is now going to start the process. And
why don't we move into that?
Well, because I wanted to summarize what you just said in a more simple way.
Okay.
And now the little organisms that start the breakdown process, Mr. Science Guy, the
bacteria, the
yes,
lactobacillus.
exactly. Yeah. So
There's
then they
other
start doing their thing. Is this only for chickens, or do you do it with quail crumbles?
Can I address that?
Do it with crumbles, pellets, with whatever feed you want to do. Can you use this fermented feed for chickens as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, specifically. Let me tell them. Okay, so any of the feeds you can ferment. You can ferment whole grains. We like the whole grains because they're whole grains. They're not cracked. You're not losing any nutrients. They last longer. Mm-hmm. You can ferment pellets. You can ferment the crumbles. The crumbles are basically crushed up pellets. So what happens when you ferment pellets or crumbles, unlike grains, is it becomes kind of like a mush, right?
Like mush.
It becomes a mush. Still edible. Still, it's the same stuff. It's still edible. It's still fine. It's still fermented. It just becomes more of like a clumpy paste. Okay, so this is the really, I think, the major difference between the two. And so straining it, once you have a paste. So with whole grain, right? We will strain it with just a typical type of kitchen strainer because the slots are sufficient. However, with that. With crumbles or with quail crumbles, when you strain them,
Kind of like a sponge. It kind of holds water.
Yeah, it's not going to strain through that sieve, and you're going to get goopy mess.
Or it may just take a really long time.
So, what's easy to do, and I do this. I used to make oat milk, which is basically the same thing. You put your grain in a cheesecloth, right? So let's say it's not going to be upside down, but you put your grain in a cheesecloth, and you kind of just squeeze it until you squeeze the water through the fabric or an old t-shirt, whatever's working.
But to answer the overall question, you can feed fermented feeds to any of your poultry. Birds, I feed it to our chickens and our ducks. I don't feed it to our quail because for me it's just too much work.
Yeah.
We have a lot of chickens and a lot of ducks. Well, not a lot of ducks, but a lot of birds in general that we're feeding our chicken layer feed to. And we eat the eggs and meat from those guys, as we do, of course, from the quail.
So we feed our chickens our special mix of My Little Dinosaur Chicken Feed. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, My Little Dinosaur Chicken Feed. So we came up with a very healthy, beneficial, proprietary mix of grains that we feed our birds, right? With added amino acids and other compounds for particularly her silkies, because they need to be tip-top, beautiful, well-formed critters. Quail are still taken care of, but it's a special need for those birds because of their plumage. So we have a special mix for them.
So let's see, a big difference too is the fermentation process. This is really good for your quail as well. The fermentation process, like Christopher mentioned, it does, it brings out, it makes the nutrients, the vitamins, and minerals in the feed more available to the bird, and it's easier for the bird to digest it and absorb those nutrients. And chickens and ducks, they're living on the ground, and are more susceptible to exposure of like parasites or bacteria, like bad stuff. And our quail are up in a hutch off the ground, so their health is usually pretty darn good. We don't really have any health issues or potential health issues with the quail. My chickens and ducks on the ground, I want to make sure their immune system is boosted and they're just like vibrant and healthy and growing well. So that's a real big reason why I'm focused on feeding them in particular, focusing my energy on feeding them in particular with the fermented feed, because it is a process. if they were up off the ground, then I wouldn't really be thinking of it too much. So because I feed them fermented grains, we have minimal health issues with our poultry that live on the ground.
They're like super birds, man. Yeah, it's very beneficial. That's true. The fermented grains in a healthy gut are going to promote resistance to illnesses, as well as a much more robust system overall.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that in the process of the grains fermenting, that the nasty bacteria don't like that environment very much with the acidity and all that stuff. Well, it's the same thing in the bird's gut. The good bacteria from the foods is now going to start living in the gut.
That's
system,
their turf.
And it's going to push out it's going to take up the space that any bad bacteria and organisms could potentially fill.
They're competing for the environment.
Yeah, so it's not a good environment for bad stuff, even in the bird's gut. So anyway, the grain, as it starts, the whole fermentation process starts, the grain will start to soften and absorb the water, and the grain will double in size. So that's another benefit, is you might have, a set amount of dry feed when you start, but then when you end, it's going to be about double the amount of feed that you have.
Because the water bulking, is that right?
Yes, yeah. And somebody might think, oh, well, if the bird is eating, let's say, the same amount, same weight, wet food, as it would be if it was dry, are they still getting the right amount of nutrients and such? Well, we already discussed that the process of fermentation is bringing out, it's making the nutrients even more available to the bird. The drier feed, it can pass through their system, and the body will absorb from it, but may not absorb everything that it can. A lot of nutrients are going to still pass through their system.
Very
with the dry
interesting.
feed.
All I was going to say is that during the fermentation, there are other compounds being produced as byproducts of the fermentation process, like folic acid, niacin, vitamin B's from the bacteria.
Yeah.
So they're actually producing extra vitamins that weren't present prior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're now going to be getting like a huge nutrient boost from their serving size that they're eating, even if it's if you're comparing it weight to weight, a different amount, like a less amount wet. Yeah. So then it's going to swell, and then when the bird is eating it, it's also going to help hydrate the bird, because it's not going to be sopping wet. They'll still eat it because it's delicious to them.
Important thing too. Remember our digestion thing. It's easier for them to digest it, especially break it down in the gizzard, because it's been softened for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm pointing up here.
That's the crop. Yeah, the gizzard's in the crop, in the digestive tract, where the stones will be stored to grind up the
which
food.
is cool. So like with a human, when we eat, we have mechanical digestion first. We chew it up. The chicken doesn't. The chicken eats whole things, puts it in its crop, moistens it, and then brings it down to their teeth in their stomach, which is the gizzard, where they chew it up. Mm-hmm. So now that it's been fermented and it's moistened and it's softer, it's going to be easier for them to grind it and pass through their body, and again, increase availability of nutrients during the metabolic process.
Yeah, so they're going to now be more hydrated, even if you strain it. And it's, there's no water like visibly in it anymore. It's still going to be damp, and they're going to absorb more water just through eating. They're going to feel full. They're going to enjoy what they're eating. It's going to smell and taste good to them. They're not going to waste the food because they're going to want to eat it all. She's talking to Bill. Yeah, so...
Are we going to show?
Yeah.
All right. What time is it? It's 24. So I got to remember this for time stamping all this stuff.
Oh.
Because people don't want to listen to us talk about this. They sure as hell don't want to hear my story about amylase, protease, and lipase. They don't want to hear my science talk. Come on, man. You
can, like we mentioned, you can use the same process for different types of feed. Do you do the full ferment then? I need to do this for my chickens and ducks.
Yeah, we do a full fermentation. The fermentation only takes a day or two. It's not long.
Well, no, It takes, when you're starting from square one with scratch, it takes about 3 days. I like to keep the water, the yeasty water, after I strain it. I keep it, and then I it's like, what is that bread called? That monkey sourdough bread?
Monkey bread.
Sorry. Anyway.
Monkey bread.
I do like an overnight soak to make the quail feed
last longer.
Yeah. But I only do that in the summer. Yeah. So I keep the water that's now yeasty, and I'll use it as a starter in my new buckets, and then it'll cut it down a day, so it's 2 days.
Now, let's do this demonstration. I forgot to mention something because I don't know. I sit around and think, and if you're wondering, where did the bacteria come from? So, which is a good question, because somebody might be wondering. They're present everywhere. All right, they're in the air, we're breathing them in, like there's bacteria on everything, and they're on the grain. They're already present there. Whenever you pick it up, there's going to be little microorganisms on everything. So they're already there.
Yeah.
Right. I make, what do you call it? Sauerkraut. So, yeah, the cabbage. I shred it up and smash it and put it in a jar. And the sauerkraut has the lactobacillus on it. And does the same kind of thing, a fermentation process. Takes longer. But yeah, so the bacteria are present in the air and in the environment. Ooh, that's smart with the water. I end up adding more water because the feed soaks it up so much. Yeah, you just want to cover it up a bit more.
Yeah, you'll get...
be very liberal with your water.
Yes, be liberal. The more you do it, which doesn't take long, you'll be familiar with how high to pour it. So, yeah. 26, not 24. Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to show a fun demonstration on fermenting grain. We're starting from scratch. So what you're going to need is a clean container, clean water, non-chlorinated water. Chlorinated water kills bacteria. It's to keep it clean, so we don't have chlorinated water. A strainer, your substrate, your feed, your food. You want to have your food. Some sort of mixing.
A mixing spoon. And for covering, we're going to put it in here. But to cover it, you can either put a lid on, a loose lid, like a screw lid, and just keep it on loosely, or you can use like this, a cheesecloth. And the reason you want to have a loose lid or a cheesecloth is because the fermentation process produces carbon dioxide, and you don't want to hear
hence it being loose
in the middle of the night.
The gases
so you want the gas to be able to escape, and you don't want any mold or anything falling down.
Air spores and such. Yeah, if it's exposed with nothing on top, then you will get mold on the surface. If the grain is out of the water. The water being over the grain will protect it and keep it from spoiling, but if it goes above the water, the grain, then it's exposed to the air and it will very likely mold. If it's covered, then it's not as likely to get mold, but it's just good to always make sure the water is above.
All right, so let's put in our chicken feed. What kind of feed are we using? Well, we're using My Little Dinosaur brand whole grain chicken feed for fermenting. Here you go, ma'am. You're the doer. I'm just a holder upper guy.
And so real quick, when you feed your birds, you're going to want to probably feed them like a day's worth. A serving for however much they're going to consume in a day. And if they don't consume all of it and it's hot temperatures outdoors, you may want to take the remainder that's left inside and put it maybe in the refrigerator. You can make lots of extra and then refrigerate what's left over, so then you have it ready to use day by day and not have to keep doing the process. Yeah.
Okay, so this is very simple. Pour in your amount. So this is demonstration amount, so we didn't put too much in there. Here we have our grain, and then we're going to cover with water. Please don't spill all over me. All right. So how high is she filling this?
I'm just going to put this much in for now because I want you guys to see.
So we're going to mix it.
So I'm going to mix it.
So what happens when you put the water in, you're still going to have little air bubbles here and there, pockets, and you're just going to mix your grain to make sure it's all wet.
So what's going to happen is you're going to see that this grain, just in a matter of minutes, it's going to start absorbing the water and it's going to start like rising. Now you can see that we have sunflower seeds here that are floating on top. They're okay. They're not going to mold. Of course, we would have this covered, but the important thing is to mix your feed at least 2 times a day, 2 or 3 times a day, just to make sure that you don't have clumping. You want it to, be thoroughly mixed as it's doing the process, because it's going to become like thicker. And the more you mix just 2 or 3 times a day, then it'll stay nice and like loose and non-like clumped. And when you do that, if you have ingredients like we do, like these black oil sunflower seeds floating on top, it'll make sure that those ingredients are moistened and wet. And they are here. We can see there's water in between everywhere, even though they're floating. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I wonder if you can tell. See, it started to get fat and expand in there.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to mix it just to, it's already getting to encourage it to go a little faster.
Okay.
So we would want to make sure there's plenty of water.
Yeah, see, it'll start pushing it and rising to the top.
Yeah.
Because as it expands, so we need to add, it should have more water. We're going to add even more water.
It's always good, like Christopher said, just to be liberal. Just add a lot of water.
And that'll be
so
fine.
The grain, was way down here. This is plenty. Now, like Kelly mentioned, she said she's adding water. She tends to have to add water because there's not enough. And that's okay. Don't be scared if you find your grain.
It's not going to corrupt the fermentation. It's not going to
if you find your feed is like a bit like there's no water left in there and it's just kind of like solid. Just pour more water in and mix it and get it loose again and just make sure the water is above. It'll get to a point where it's not going to really continue absorbing. And you'll become familiar with how long that takes for you.
And you're going to do the same with the crumbles, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to mix crumbles or the pellets. Mm-hmm. And they're going to fall apart and you'll be like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? But it's fine. Pellets are held together with a binder and they fall apart pretty easily. Mm-hmm. So now this stuff is soaking real quick and we're going to strain it and show you that. There's the temperature. Somebody asked, what's the temperature?
Yeah.
You want to keep this at?
If you have it like room temperature in your home, in your basement, I would say like 70 degrees. It'll take around 3 days. If you're starting from square one like this, it'll take about 3 days to have the grains nicely fermented, but not to the point where it's overly fermented. So that is a thing. If you overly ferment it, your birds will go from super excited at seeing you with food time, running up to you because they just love it, it tastes so good, and it smells so good, to being like, that doesn't smell good. If it's too
sour,
it'll be sour. They'll be just like, I'm not gonna eat that. Mm-hmm. So that just you'll be able to tell a difference in the smell and the scent.
They're very temperature, so the fermenting is very temperature sensitive. If it's hotter, it's going to ferment real quick.
Yeah, and you'll see the water will look more tannish or depending on the feed you're using. It's consistent. It's a consistent process. So yeah, about 3 days. If you're reusing water that's already yeasty, that's like a Kickstarter. If you're using water that's warm, from the start, you're putting warm water versus cold water. That'll also get it kickstarted a little faster. So it could be 2 days.
Yeah. And it'll stop fermenting once it's cold. Once you take it out and put it in the fridge, especially once you get out of the water. So it rose a little bit, maybe you can see, but we're going to pretend it's been 3 days or 2.5 days and we're all fermented. And once it's done fermenting, this water gets a much deeper color.
And you'll smell it. It'll smell like, how can you describe? Like beer fermenting, I guess.
Like you just staggered out of a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. How's that? Like a smelly bar.
I was gonna say something. I forget.
Smell? Okay. Well, do you want to strain?
Yeah. It's something important. Hopefully it comes back to me.
It'll come back. So we're going to strain. Oh, I got that big bowl to strain. Here, you're going to pour it in. I'll hold this. So we're going to strain it. So we're going to pretend it's been like 3 days.
Oh, yeah. So the smell the first day will be pretty, like, it'll smell like wet grain. And then you're going to start seeing bubbles. You know, as you mix it, you're going to see bubbles coming up. And that's part of the fermentation process.
Carbon
You know,
dioxide.
it's doing its thing.
Yeah.
So bubbles is good. Okay. So that's what I want to
So
say.
now we're straining. Hopefully it doesn't splash everywhere. So we strain the grain. And we're going to keep the water because the water can be used for the next fermenting, right?
Yeah.
All right. Now, if you have a spoon, scoop it out. But are we going to use a spoon?
We're just going to... We'll pretend all of the ingredients came out.
We'll pretend we scooped everything out. So, yeah, there's a white bowl.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's our grain. And here is our, you know, if this has been 3 days, it's full of bacteria and it's an acidic environment. We can reuse that to start the next fermenting, which will go really quick now that we already have an established kind of starter.
And if you're not going to use it immediately, I would recommend, you know, keeping it in a lid on top.
And if you were using the pellets or the crumbles and you're fermenting them, use the cheesecloth. Put it in there, wrap it up, and then squeeze it out. You'll be able to squeeze out all the water and keep your... And you're going to have to rinse off your cloth.
And then when you're feeding, you're going to want to give them about what you think, like I said earlier, what you think they'll eat in a day. And that'll be, you know, a bit of like figuring out what's left after a certain amount of hours. If it's layer birds, like our black Australorp chickens, they eat very fast. Typical layer birds, layer chickens, they eat very fast. Silkies, they are very mellow. They'll eat initially, and then they'll be like, I'm gonna visit. I give them a couple hours to eat their food.
Slow.
But my layer birds, they take like 5 to 10 minutes, and it's all gone. And if I gave them more to eat like within 15, 20 minutes, then they'll just absolutely gorge themselves. So it's important to eye your birds, see how big their crop is. Because if you're giving them way too much and they're eating it all, then they're going to start gaining weight. And you don't want to overfeed them. You want to feed them what they need. Silkies, they take longer, and I'm not concerned about them overeating because they don't really, mine don't overeat. The quail, you want them to have food available throughout the whole day. So yeah, and yeah.
And there you go. So a fake fermented grain. We didn't really ferment it, but we did an example. So that's how you do that. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. It's good for the birds. There's a lot of convey health benefits, which we discussed.
Oh, here's a quick note. I would recommend feeding with the quail to give them another feeder with dry feed included. So then you can give them a nice amount to last all day. But then if they're, you know, late evening, early morning, then they can still have dry feed to eat. And
the same with the chickens. You want to transition them. You just don't want to switch out immediately for one food to the next. You're going to mix it in or maybe put it next to it so they're seeing there's another option, and then gradually mix it into there. And it should happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, they like
the transition.
Fermented feed.
But it's easy to do, to introduce it to them that way, rather than have them wondering what's going on.
But they can smell it, so it won't take them long before they want to eat it. Yeah.
Cool. I think, does that just about do it?
I think so.
Next week we're going to be talking about nuclear physics. Yeah, just kidding. Just kidding. We're going to do that. I do like nuclear physics. All right, anyway.
But yeah, let us know if you have any
other
questions or comments.
Questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the old comments. Send us a message on the book. I hope this was informative, somewhat educational. Sorry if I was too, bland, too professor. I don't know. I read a lot, and I'm really fast. I'm like a 2-year-old or 4-year-old, maybe like a 5-year-old. I'm very curious about stuff, and I'm always interested in the mechanics of the world. And the more you learn, it's like the more you appreciate it. I said this before, so I'm interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why I rambled. Scientific rambling.
Yeah.
All right, friends, we appreciate you coming by. I hope this was of interest. If you're new, hit the old sub button. And if you have a suggestion that you want to see a video, let us know, and we'll probably do that. Quailton physics. I could do quail physics. I mean, we can do a physics test with the quails. I think it would be a good class. Maybe. All right, I got to fix my catapults and all that stuff. All right, you guys. Bill, Susan, everybody, if you're still around, Kelly, have a wonderful evening, and I guess we'll see you later. I'm going to hit the
Yeah.
button.